We're here today this evening for a lecture by Dr. Siobhan Osgood, and we are all delighted that you have come here for what is the second talk in our monthly series, the opening series. This year we have curated a diverse lineup of talks covering a broad range of topics. You can see the full schedule on the screen here. Our goal with the series is to amplify diverse voices and to offer fresh perspectives on familiar stories and bring attention to those that remain untold. We aim to highlight groundbreaking research and new publications that deepen our understanding of Dublin's social, built and cultural heritage. So this lecture series is an initiative of the Dublin City Strategic Heritage Plan and is made possible through grant funding from the Heritage Council's County Heritage Plan grant scheme. And before I introduce you to Dr. Osgood, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge those who have made this evening possible. Firstly, a huge thanks to my colleague Abigail O'Reilly, whom you'll have met at the door, for her hard work in helping to organise the series. And I'd also like to express my gratitude to Susan Foley-Cave, who is providing Irish Sign Language interpretation for us this evening, ensuring that everyone can fully engage with the lecture series. A special thank you also to the Lord Mayor, Councillor Emma Blaine, and the wonderful staff of the Mansion House for hosting us here this evening. Now on to our speaker. Dr. Siobhan Osgood is a railway and architectural historian, specialising in industrial archaeology and 19th century building practices. She completed her doctoral thesis, Building the Great Northern Railway Ireland, Design, Communication and Construction at Trinity College Dublin, funded by the Irish Research Council. And if you want to find out more about her research, please refer to railwayarchitecture.com. So really there's nobody more qualified than Siobhan to present to us her lecture this evening, Dublin's Railway Architecture. So will you please join me in welcoming her to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody. I'll just put that down because I'm very, very small, so there we are. Thank you very much for coming, and hopefully this will all get started. There we are, yes. So, Charles has kind of already said everything. I was going to do an introduction to me, but yes, I finished my PhD 2 years ago, and it researched the architecture of the former Great Northern Railway. But the themes that I researched are universal for all railway architecture and indeed railway companies globally, in terms of the way companies are ordered, the way that they are managed, and the output of architecture is produced, and the way in which architectural processes work. This, in fact, is one of the key themes that my research not necessarily discovered, but analysed and wrote about, is the formalisation and the universality of architectural practices and the architectural processes involved. So for this evening's talk, I'm going to focus on Dublin's original 5 terminal stations. We have Pearse Street, which was originally Westland Row, Connolly Station, which was originally Amiens Street Station, the Loop Line, which of course is now the Dart Line, which connects these 2 railway stations to each other, Heuston Station, and lastly Broadstone and Harcourt Street, the latter 2 of which are now closed. And as we go through this talk, it's going to be quite technical in terms of maybe descriptions of buildings, names of artists, architects and engineers, as well as looking at some of the original drawings. But one thing I want you to bear in mind is these are all very, very early examples of railway architectural design. And at this time, railway architecture is a completely new concept. This is a new type of building. What is a railway station? How did it operate? How do we as a society operate within them? What facilities are required? All of this was completely and utterly unknown. And so the reason that we have these different architectural styles is really a form of experimentation. There is a reason why Heuston, which is here in the background, for example, looks like a grand opera house. It's because people weren't fully confident in what a railway station should look like. It's a massive public building, therefore what other massive public buildings do we have to take inspiration from? So just bear that in mind as kind of a key theme as we analyse some of these buildings. And I always like to include, to start with, this map from 1906, and then the present one that we have today. It always gets the same reaction, a bit of a because we can see what we've lost. Particularly, I think, most notably is, of course, in Ulster, and how much the creation of the border has impacted on the loss of railway infrastructure and, by definition, connectivity through transport across the island. And so, we begin. The first commuter railway company in Ireland opened with the Dublin and Kingstown Railway, which opened in 1834. It was the world's first passenger commuter railway line. So what that means is that it was built completely and utterly for carrying passengers rather than freight or goods services. I love this engraving here, this illustration with, you know, the sheer kind of surprise and amazement at the birth of the railways. You know, everyone's hats are blowing off in amazement at them. This is actually an elevator. Where are you standing? You're standing on Cumberland Street, which is at the back of Pearse Street Station. And all these bridges, these very, very low bridges, still exist. I'm sure many of you are aware. And a lot of them have, I think it's on the next slide, these little pedestrian tunnels either side of the road openings as well. And so we have the railway stations, but we also have the accompanying infrastructure, which of course is incredibly disruptive to the streetscape. And that it's not just that railway stations provide a new architectural focal point of a streetscape. It's actually that entire cities are carved up by railway lines and things like viaducts and bridges and all these new kind of forms of buildings and engineering works are all being kind of dumped down upon society. And how does this change the way we relate to our streets and streetscapes? So the contractor for the Dublin and Kingstown Railway was William Dargan. William Dargan is a fascinating man, and he personally financed almost all of Ireland's railway companies. He believed completely and utterly and totally in the improvements and modernisation that the railways would provide to Ireland. He also completely self-financed the Great Dublin Exhibition, which was in 1853. This is now where the National Gallery stands, and it was based off the Great Exhibition, the Crystal Palace, which happened in London. This is an interior shot, a very, very rare early photograph of the Dublin Exhibition, and it was an industrial exhibition. It was all about promoting Irish industry, Irish manufacturing, and modernisation, how Ireland was becoming modernised. And we think about Ireland in the mid-19th century, we don't necessarily have that perception of it, but this is an example of the complex kind of dynamics that are going on at the time during the 19th century. So like I said, the National Gallery is now built on the site of where the exhibition stands, and they've shoved poor old William Dargan, the statue of him is shoved all the way over there into the corner. Of course, you have the Dargan wing in the National Gallery. The man needs to be kind of front and centre, in my opinion, but I obviously wasn't consulted when they redid the National Gallery. And so we come to the railway station at Westland Row itself. It was designed by the railway company's engineer, which was Charles Blacker Vignoles. And you can see the original station drawing by Vignoles himself is up here on the top. And he also designed the end of the line, which of course is now Dunleary Station. And I think it's not in use anymore. I think it's a Catholic, that's it, yeah. And as we know, of course, Westland Row Station has now been changed, which we'll get to. So Charles Black of Vignoles is very, very interesting. He's of Huguenot descent. He was born in County Wexford, but he moved to England when he was an infant. And so he's predominantly thought of as an English engineer. But of course, if we can claim him for our own, she says with this accent, then we will do. I have my Irish passport. You can't take it away from me. But he was a prolific inventor and engineer, and he was always toying around with different inventions, and he invented the atmospheric railway. And you have Atmospheric Road in Dunleary as well. There used to be, the atmospheric railway was there. And again, he had it, it still exists in Brighton, along the seafront in Brighton. And it's now kind of a tourist attraction that you can go along. And it's essentially, if you imagine vacuum pumps, is how it's propelled forward. There's no steam and there's no electricity. It's all completely used through kind of vacuum pumps, essentially. I don't know if I'm explaining. I'm not an engineer. Explaining it very well. And what's interesting about this is the earliest railway station in Ireland, is that it's not designed by an architect. It's designed by an engineer who had to completely and utterly understand the job at hand, and that is to provide a frontispiece to a functional building. Again, what was a railway station supposed to look like? It had to be invented and started from scratch. This is Vignoles' earliest example of a railway station. It's very, very simple. It takes its inspiration from the Georgian streetscape with 6/6 sash windows with these pediments up at the top, and you've got projecting ever so slightly. Of course, it doesn't exist anymore, but you can get the sense from the shading in the central block. It projects ever so slightly, and then it has two recessed wings either side, and the opening over on the left-hand side was a carriageway, and this led all the way along through what is now the southern platform. And that provided access for carriages, for luggage, parcels, and things like that. So this is the roof as it stood about, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. It's now recently been completely renovated. This was not the original roof either. This is the replacement from 1891. And it was completely replaced when the Loop Line bridge was constructed. Sorry, the Loop Line itself was constructed. And then, of course, the bridge across Westland Row was constructed as well. And the roof then was completely replaced. The engineer for that was Thomas Benjamin Grierson, who also, sorry, this is just a close-up as well of, this is now the restoration work that's taken place. So they've managed to keep an awful lot of the 1891 fabric of cast and wrought iron structure, but they've also replaced it as well. But they've done it in a you can see the original fabric down on this bit. They've done a very nice job, I think, of restoring the station roof. And this is the Loop Line under construction. It was completed in 1891, and you can see the original station just here. Just here, this window here, this bit. This is obviously a separate building, just this bit here. Obviously, that gets completely demolished, but it's nice to be able to see the kind of the extra modernisation that is happening with the installation of the Loop Line, and the rather than just always going by a drawing, that we actually have photographic evidence of the original station building. That's not often the case. So, like I said, the Loop Line bridge, as well as the new facade, was designed by Thomas Benjamin Grierson. Again, this is an engineer designing the front of a railway station, predominantly because it's made in iron. Iron tends to be the domain of the engineer. Engineers love cast iron. It's easy, you can order it from a catalogue, and it can be made in repeat patterns, and it can be installed. It's light, it's transportable, and it's incredibly cost effective. And of course, it's strong and it lasts a very, very long time. And it's highly decorative. So this is the original drawing, design drawing for it. And what's interesting about it is it largely respects the original design of Vignol's first railway station as well, in terms of symmetry and in terms of the openings at the front as well. And again, you have the cab exit gate over on the left-hand side, which of course matches that opening that we saw on the original station. And like I said, it's really interesting to get up close. I think because it's painted brown, Pierce Street gets a bit of an unfair treatment as being quite an ugly railway station. I don't think many people like it very much. I certainly have taken students here and said, you know, come on, look up, look at these amazing mouldings and things. And they just think, ooh, this is disgusting. I don't know why we're looking at this. And I'm there going, industry, come on. But really, when you look at the sheer amount of mouldings and the liveliness of the facade, all generated by cast iron, it's the epitome of late 19th century engineering and mass manufacturing. So if you want an example of really when railway construction and railway engineering is at its peak, I would say the front of Pierce Street Station provides it, with graffiti and everything added as well. This is Grierson's design drawing for it as well. It goes to show, you know, engineers knew what a Corinthian capital was. They didn't necessarily know how to pair it and make it, you know, match in with other things. But I love these bases. I mean, what is that based on? It almost looks like some kind of medieval manuscript or something from a church. But it's, you know, it's thrown in there. It's fantastic. This is, you know, late 19th century eclecticism in practice. And the brickwork was updated by Thomas Newenham Dean. He was an architect. But again, it's a perfect example of the use of mass manufacturing and catalogues, this time in brick. How many shapes of brick do you need to design a door opening? And again, terracotta, this moulded terracotta frieze. It's incredibly ornate. It's hidden. I don't know if you can see it. It's these doorways here. There. It's these two. Excuse me. And again, you can just make some of it out there. That decorative terracotta work there. And again, it's all kind of maybe seen as a little bit of a jumble, but these are architects and engineers that are really making use of the technology of the time and the technology advancements for manufacturing and the ability to pick and choose from catalogues and put it all together and make a railway station from it. This is the loop line which crosses over the River Liffey. Some people love it, some people hate it. I'm obviously a lover of it. It was designed by George Hemingway Mills at the Great Northern Railway and the chief engineer for the Dublin, Wicklow and Wexford Railway, John Chalona Smith. I always have to be careful when I pronounce his middle name. And it was a partnership between the two railway companies. And it culminates where this enormous lattice girder bridge crosses over the River Liffey, completely obstructing the view of the Custom House. And this is one thing of the day where it really, really upset an awful lot of people when it was constructed. But there's a sense that kind of modernisation and industry was the order of the day. And so I love it. I think it's absolutely wonderful, but I can appreciate that it's not to everyone's taste. And so this brings us to Connolly Station. So Connolly Station, formerly Amiens Street Station. I tend to call it Amiens Street Station just through repetition of constantly writing and talking about it. It was built for the Dublin and Drogheda Railway, which the company itself and the first train departed in 1844, but the station itself wasn't complete until 1846. Another example of the train shed and platforms behind the station being easier and quicker to manufacture and to build than a granite railway station. We think about functionality. A train is able to leave a station without the station actually being there in the first place. And it's in an Italianate style. We've got this very, very large central campanile, which is completely redundant. You know, there's no actual bell in there whatsoever. And then these two flanking towers either side. And it's got these all these different types of features, these Lombardic features of these round arches, these projecting balconies with balustrades, neoclassical arcading and columns down at the bottom with Corinthian capitals, this enormous keystone in the centre of the main archway, and of course the wonderful station clock. A station always has to have a clock. One interesting feature that came to light only in 2021 is Irish Rail have been renovating Connolly station, and I was contacted by the conservation architects about the paint on these balustrades. So have I got an up-close picture of it? No, I haven't. So these bits, I need to have a long stick. These bits here and all along there, they're actually iron, and nobody knew that, because of course they've been painted to look like stone. And she peeled back about 5 or 6 different layers of coloured paint, and what she was trying to say, or trying to ask me, was what was the original colour, because obviously we're trying to restore the station, and the first paint, a coat of paint, is actually a rather lurid blue, and I say that must be a primer or something. Surely to goodness they wouldn't have had bright blue kind of cast iron balustrades, but maybe they did. we have no way of finding out, no way of knowing. It's not written anywhere that I have managed to find. We've automatically assumed that they're made from stone. But again, it's a really nice feature. Did it cost too much money to get them individually carved? And then there's this, again, the efficiencies of cast iron production all, you know, sort of coming into the fore. It's very, very interesting. And one thing I really liked was finding the original architectural design by William Dean Butler. This is hidden away in the Irish Railway Record Society archives. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of original architectural drawings for all the railway companies in Ireland. And this is, I've actually had to enhance this in order to so that you can actually see it a bit more clearly on the screen. But it's very, very dark. And the sketches are they're not formalised. This is very much taken from a sketchbook. It's only about this big. So it's really straight from the mind's eye of the architect is the design for the front entrance of Amiens Street Station. And so it's built from Wicklow granite, which comes from Ballyknocken, which is obviously in the Wicklow Mountains. And the quarry was owned by a man called Patrick Olligan. Now, that's probably a misspelling, you know, and a mispronunciation. But he originally had a quarry in Kildare, which either the quality of the granite was starting to disintegrate, or he realised that, you know, there was a larger market to be had from the Wicklow Mountains. And so he brought 400 men, this is kind of the written account of it, is that 400 men came marching with him and they descended on County Wicklow, and they set up a quarry at Ballyknocken. Ballyknocken itself developed then as a town, as a village, all around the quarries. And this is one of the kind of remains of the quarrying industry, which naturally now, of course, have become filled in with lakes. And we get to then the era of the Great Northern Railway. This is William Hemingway Mills. This is my hero. He really is, I'm looking up at him now, kind of a grandfather figure, really, for Irish railway architecture and Irish railway engineering. He was the first engineer-in-chief for the Great Northern Railway. He stayed in that position for over 33 years until he retired. And over that course of time, he modernised and upgraded the infrastructure of the Great Northern Railway all across its railway network, which extended all the way up into Northern Ireland and across to Donegal as well. One of the first changes that he made to Connolly station was a new entrance. This entrance was has now been replaced by the Lewis. So now this is gone. But the original station used to have steps to the southern entrance. That was William Dean Butler's design. Mills came along and installed an enormous ramp. So it was gently sloping all the way from Amiens Street all the way up to the top level. If we think about Connolly station, the concourse is on the first floor. So the ramp brought you all the way from street level all the way up to the first floor. And this was the new entrance. And the doorway in the middle is actually a revolving door, which in itself feels like an engineer having a bit of fun with some new technology. Another upgrade to Connolly station that was made by Mills, you can see his signature down there on the left-hand side, was to upgrade, right-hand side. Getting a bit, you know what I mean, I'm pointing at it, it's fine. Was to construct this enormous running shed. This runs the entire length of the platforms. And you can see it from the eastern side of the station, so you kind of have to walk to the back of it. And it's probably one of my favourite features of Irish railway architecture. We've got this round, this round arch style being enacted, which has its basis in Italianate architecture, which of course is the front of the station. But Mills is taking that style to kind of an enormous sort of magnitude, a kind of a monster level of installing. There's 25 of these round arches. They stretch the entire length of the platform, and they're all constructed from mass manufactured red and yellow bricks. Again, a testament to engineering and industrial mass manufacturing. And so we come to the original train shed. Like I said, it was constructed before the main station building was completed. So the roof was finished in 1844 and it was designed by Sir John McNeill. He is an Irish engineer who was born in County Louth. And this is his original design drawing for the shed. And again, his signature is down there, right down in the right hand corner. Hopefully you can just about make it out down there. And William Hemingway Mills replaced McNeill's shed. Where am I? Sorry, I have the date in here. In 1884. And these are the piers and arches that you can see surviving right down in kind of the right-hand side of that image there. The top then of the roof, again, that's completely replaced. That was replaced, I think, around about the 1990s, early 2000s. Somebody may be better able to correct me on that. But I'm going to introduce you to an ironmonger called Robert Mallet. His foundry with his father, John and Robert Mallet's, was at Riders Row, right in the centre of Dublin. This is literally just at the top of Capel Street. Get a sense of industry. Dublin is very much an industrial city. This is a point that I really, really like to stress, is that there's a misconception that Ireland was never industrialised, that they didn't have any industrial revolution. They did. Ireland railways are the epitome of industry and industrialisation, and all of this iron, all of these building materials, bricks, granite, so on and so forth, is all coming from within the country. It's all having to be extracted, manufactured, and handled and installed by Irish craftspeople. And so just thinking about iron foundries that are slap bang in the city centre, I think is really quite incredible. And the fact that their work still survives to this very day. This is John McNeill himself. I had to squeeze a photo of him in somewhere. I really think he deserves a statue. If we think of William Dargan shoved into a corner, I think John McNeill needs to take pride of place somewhere in the centre of Dublin. He also designed and had constructed the viaduct, which is over Sheriff Street, which is, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but just to try and describe, you have Amiens Street kind of going in a straight line. Sheriff Street is over to the right-hand side. It goes east to west, and it supports above the concourse. This is the concourse above and platforms above, all being supported by these enormous Grecian columns, which are made out of cast iron. And these are the originals. They're manufactured by Coalbrookdale, which is a company in Wiltshire, and installed in 1844. Again, they're still there, they still exist, doing the job that they're intended to do nearly 200 years later. So we come back to William Hemingway Mills. This is a massive office extension that he installed in 1896. And as you can see, he's chosen to return to the red and yellow bricks, this time with the introduction of blue bricks. They look black, but they're actually Staffordshire blue bricks. I talked earlier about the sense of cataloguing and a catalogue of brick shapes and mouldings that can be ordered and flung sort of at a facade of a building. I think we can all agree Mills has kind of outdone himself here. There's keystones all over the place. We've got ocular windows, string coursing, terracotta moulding, these friezes up here. This bit all along there, that's moulded yellow terracotta. We've got round arch styles, we've got semi-architrave windows, we've got these enormous round arch styles to the basement as well. And it's this eclectic mix of Lombardic, Italianate and Tudor. It doesn't seem like it, but Tudor architectural features. The reason I say Tudor is because of the use of labelling. Labelling is what he's picked out in the blue bricks, the hood mouldings that go on top of the windows. They're picked out in projecting brick string courses. That's called labelling, and you traditionally see them on Tudor mansions. We return to the Loop Line bridge, and this is the Loop Line itself, and the platform that was constructed at Connolly station for it. And again, this is designed by William Hemingway Mills, and this is the original design drawing for it. I mean, I love these drawings. I won't go into them too much, but basically my PhD is essentially about these drawings. But again, it survives to this day. And the use of cast iron with, I mentioned Tudor, these are these types of medieval quatrefoil mouldings that are really for window tracery in churches, are actually being used in cast iron spandrels to support a truss iron roof. And again, it's all original and it all exists and it's still there today. So now we come to Heuston Station, which is formerly Kingsbridge, also constructed from Ballyknocken granite, but in a completely different style. It does have Italianate principles at its heart, but it is built in the neoclassical palazzo style. It's also incredibly ornate, as I'm sure you can appreciate, with these pilasters up at the front. We've got topped with Corinthian capitals, swags. Where is it? Not even up close of it. Has it gone? These swags of cornucopias of fruit, and these pediments, carved, moulded pediments, and underneath the roof eaves and everything like that. And go back. The interesting thing about Heuston Station is, like Amiens Street, the train shed was finished first. It was also designed by John McNeill. And unlike Amiens Street, this is the original train shed. These cast iron columns here, they're all original. And again, they're still intact and they're still supporting the roof. The roof at the time was one of the largest ever constructed in the British Isles. It's five gables wide, absolutely enormous, I'm sure you can appreciate. And it really just shows the confidence of the investment of the success of railway construction. Again, this is only the third railway station to be built within very, very quick succession. And yet we're going to need loads of platforms because loads of people are going to be using the railways. And so they started as they meant to carry on. And I really quite like the confidence of the age that comes with this. And so because McNeill's roof was finished first, he actually got to run a competition to see whose station would get to act as the frontispiece to his train shed. So we often think of train sheds as kind of the secondary cousin that sort of sits at the back. But in this case, it's actually the foundation of the footprint of the station was the train shed. There were 67 entries to the architectural competition. McNeill was allowed to choose his shortlist. He chose 7 of his favourite designs. He preferred a design by John Skipton Mulvaney, but it had to be referred to the London Committee of the Railway Company, and they chose this design by the English architect. I'm not saying that has anything to do with it. Sancton Wood. Sancton Wood had worked already on a lot of railway stations in England, so he kind of had a bit of a track record. Sorry. But, you know, compared to Amiens Street, we can see a real boldness in this design and the confidence that comes from a classically trained architect, somebody who's completely aware of Renaissance and European ideals of architectural features and the richness of decoration that can be used to enliven elevations and facades, and completely redundant these pepper-popped campaniles either side. Again, if they'd had a bell or a clock or something in them, maybe you could appreciate them. But maybe I'm too much focused on engineering for kind of these superfluous flourishes. But they stand today, and they are obviously very nice to look at. And so we come to Broadstone Station. This is now closed. It's now where Bus Éireann have their headquarters, and it's absolutely enormous. It was built at the top of Constitution Hill. It's to the north side of the city, and it was built for the Great Western Railway, and it started in 1841, but the station itself wasn't actually completed until 1852. So when we think about that in relation to the other railway stations, this has taken an incredibly long time to come to completion. It was designed by John Skipton Mulvaney, so he didn't get to have his fun at Heuston, but he entered this design for Broadstone Station and was successful. We can see that it does have neoclassicism as its base. We have these pediments up to the top, but it is built in a neo-Egyptian style. So Egyptology was becoming very much a vogue trend around about the 1840s, 1850s. And the kind of shapes very much of, it starts to feed into Art Deco, if you like, at the end of the 19th century, of very, very broad bases, which start to narrow up towards the top and have slightly curved overhangs, and the use of these palmettes, these carved palmettes and wreaths, are all a bit of a juxtaposition between classicism and Egyptology, and again this sort of merging of the ancient worlds. Even though we're a building which is the epitome of modernisation. I'll go back. This is another example. This is the Newry Arch, also known as the Egyptian Arch. That's designed by John McNeill. And you can get the sense of what I'm talking about here, where it starts out very, very wide at the base and then starts to taper in towards the top. This is an original etching of Broadstone Station. You can see that it used to have, I think it still stands, I'll have to double check, this enormous arcade that ran the entire length of the platform for passenger entry and cabs and things like carriages and things like that. It's the style of it. So it's built in the Neo-Egyptian style. Yeah, yeah. So this is a floor plan, an aerial plan for Broadstone station. One of the interesting features about it is that the canal, the Royal Canal, used to come right up to the front door. You can see here, all the way here, and continues across here. This here is a pontoon bridge. It was actually a floating iron bridge which provided access, the vehicular access to the railway station, and that was designed by Robert Mallet, who we met earlier. And I should have said, Mallet also provided the ironwork for Heuston station. The canal got filled in I think it's 1958, 1957, and so now at the front, that's very much just a kind of, it's a car park, I think, isn't it? The front Broadstone station. And you can see the engine sheds and the turntables up here on the left-hand side, and they were designed by the engineer George Willoughby Hemans, as well as George Wilkinson. George Wilkinson designed the turntable and engine shed, which here you can see is being demolished. And I do believe these stone engine sheds still stand, to my knowledge, as well. So they're George Wilkinson as well. And so finally we come to Harcourt Street station. I mentioned George Wilkinson. George Wilkinson also designed Harcourt Street station. It was opened in 1859 for the Dublin, Wicklow and Wexford Railway. And again, it's built using granite, but also a mix of red bricks as well. This is closed. I think it's now a nightclub or a bar or a restaurant or something. Yeah. And the Lewis now has a stop outside the front of it as well. And you can see that the running shed for the platforms is slightly elevated and runs towards the back. You can make out that where the Players Please sign is. It's that building just up there. That's where the platforms were, hence the steps up to the front. And this is, again, we're kind of returning to classical principles, but we're kind of focusing in on the Romanesque style. So a large central round arch entrance with a recessed arcade and rather kind of slim columns here instead of the big chunky ones that we may be used to seeing on some of the other railway stations. This is the famous Harcourt Street train crash, which was in 1900. And this is coming out of this wall here. This one. Imagine it coming out there and into the street there. Hatch came out of the side of the building onto Hatch Street. I'm not saying that William Richard Lefanu was necessarily responsible for it, but he was responsible for the design of the way in which goods sheds and locomotives had to shunt. So if we think of, my point of reference is now Thomas the Tank Engine, because my 2-year-old is watching Thomas the Tank Engine. There's no turntable. And so we have the sidings here on the lower part of the aerial plan. They come in, and in order to go back, they have to shunt back out, and they have to go back into the platform, and they have to come back out, and they have to come back in, they have to come back out. There's railway people here who will be able to explain this much more clearly than I can. But essentially what was happening is there was enormous pressure on engines and carriages being shunted back and forth, and that the brakes didn't work, and the locomotive went through the buffers. These are the buffers down here, and crashed through the wall. It was fixed, to be fair, but then it closed. And I quite like this photograph. Sold. 67,000 is a bit of a bargain, really, when you think about it in today's money. How many bed sits would you get in there? And the photograph on the left-hand side is taken 13 days after the last train departed from the station, and that happened on New Year's Eve in 1958, and you can see the tinsel is still hanging from the roof rafters. But it's also a nice photograph because you can get a sense of the decorative nature of the finishes at Harcourt Street Station. These diamond mullioned ocular windows and fan lights are actually quite unusual. And so I will summarise. I think I've kept on time, which is good. I'm usually a waffler. Has anyone fallen asleep? We're all still awake? Sometimes I used to clap in my lectures just to wake everybody up by the end of it, but that's fine. We all seem to be awake, so that's fine. So it's been very, very quick. I've shouted an awful lot of things at you, lots of facts, lots of people, lots of different styles of architecture to consider. But I want really to leave you with the overall theme that, as I said at the beginning, railway architecture is a completely new concept at the time that these railway stations are being built. As we start to get to the middle and the end of the 19th century, construction methods, manufacturing methods, the education and training of engineers, and the economics around the efficiencies of architectural production practices ensure more kind of uniform aspects of design. For example, the brick branding and the use of kind of cheaper materials such as brick for railway stations and architectural features. And also to remember that Ireland was industrialised. Ireland did produce its own industrial manufacturing. It did have factories, it did have engineers, it did have engineering departments at universities. I was speaking with somebody earlier today. I was actually, this is blowing my own trumpet, I was filmed earlier today for a documentary that's coming out on TG Caher, and the woman who was kind of, setting me up and everything, and she's like, do you think Ireland would have done, if we didn't have the British, we never would have had the railways. And I said, right, I'm going to get that on camera. And I made a point of saying, Ireland actually had an awful lot of the firsts when it came to railway construction and railway engineering, and in particular the formalisation of engineering education happened in Ireland first, anywhere in the world. Happened at Trinity College, it happened in Galway, and it happened in Cork, and it happened at Belfast. So in terms of an engineering legacy and the railway legacy of heritage, Ireland really does lead the way, so don't let the Brits have everything. And it's Easter week, and they're all named after leaders of the proclamation, so I think, honestly, it's quite fitting of that, so thank you very much. Yeah.